There are new questions today in the Stormy Daniels scandal after the president pleaded ignorance to hush money sent to Daniels. He said that he didn't know his lawyer, personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, paid the adult film star $130,000 to keep her quiet before the 2016 election. It was the president's first public remarks since Daniel came forward about an alleged sexual encounter with Mr. Trump back in 2006. The president also said that he does not know exactly where the money came from. Justice reporter Paula Reed has more.
Did you know about the $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels?
Speaking to reporters aboard Air Force One, President Trump denied knowing about the agreement negotiated by his personal attorney, Michael Cohen.
Why did Michael Cohen make it if there was no truth or allegation?
Well, you have to ask Michael Cohen. Michael's my attorney, and you'll have to ask Michael.
He also denied knowing the source of the $130,000.
Do you know where he got the money to make that payment?
No, I don't know.
Daniels told 60 Minutes she had one sexual encounter with Mr. Trump in 2006 and was paid to keep quiet.
I was concerned for my family and their safety.
She is suing to invalidate the agreement, arguing the contract is not valid because the president never signed it. She also argues their deal could have violated federal election law.
You can't be a party to an agreement, have a binding contract, if you claim that you basically didn't know about a principal term, a material term in the contract.
Daniels' attorney, Michael Avenatti, believes the president's denial helps his client's case.
We think that the president's comments today have not only placed Mr. Cohen in the crosshairs, but also subjected himself to significant exposure for a deposition.
But Michael Cohen's spokesman, David Schwartz, has denied the agreement with Daniels had anything to do with the campaign. On CBS this morning, he said the money was paid to protect Mr. Trump's reputation.
Can I have a non-disclosure agreement signed and go on with my life, or am I going to enter into a messy litigation?
And joining me now to break down the legal questions raised by the president's comments is attorney Emily Compagno. She joins me now. So, Emily, is it okay if Michael Cohen entered his client into this, the president, into this agreement without the president's knowledge? Is that kosher?
Right. Generally, ethics laws forbid it. And I will say that the New York State Bar expressly forbids an attorney making material developments that, as the code specifically says, include settlements without informing their client, without informing, in this case, the president. So here, right there, that would be an ethics violation. And it does raise additional questions of then whether this is an illegal contribution.
So Stormy Daniels' lawyer tweeted that the president's comments actually strengthens their case exponentially. Do you agree with that?
I believe that there are many moving parts here, and that this is a complicated situation, and so it's difficult to, for this one thing to mean that it strengthens their case exponentially. That will be up to the courts. But I want viewers to understand two important things here. That number one, that arbitration clause is valid regardless of the NDA's validity in California courts. And secondly, the Supreme Court has not yet ruled on the president's immunity in a state court about a conduct that isn't official prior to an election. So those are two incredibly important things here that Avenatti hasn't mentioned.
So the president is trying to force Daniels into some sort of arbitration instead of letting this go into a lawsuit. Do you expect that these comments will have any impact on that effort moving forward?
I will say that the strength of the arbitration clause, it's strong without any ancillary comments, but we have seen since the president was elected that his tweets are considered part of the public record, part of the official record from the White House. We've seen judges throughout the circuits rely on it and use it in their materials that they've considered to make decisions. So his comments will be important. They will be taken into consideration, including those tweets, but it won't necessarily affect the validity of the arbitration clause, which again kind of falls squarely within California law.
So do you think that Michael Cohen could be accused of committing fraud against Stormy Daniels if he got her to this agreement without actually disclosing it to his client, the president, who have said publicly, I had no knowledge of this?
The leap to a fraud conclusion just based on the fact of not informing his client, that would be the courts for deciding. There would have to be additional factors. But I will say that if he did indeed execute this agreement without his employer's consent or knowledge, then there would have to be additional factors that would allow him legally to do so, that he would have to be representing himself in some fashion or the organization separately, which, as we talked about earlier, defies ethics laws. So again, it's a complicated process, and I don't mean to be evasive, but simply to illustrate that there's a lot more at stake. make. So again, fraud is kind of, that's a pretty strong conclusion to draw, but I will say that it definitely puts Michael Cohen squarely in the spotlight right now.
Do you think that Cohen could be disbarred?
That is a stretch, but I will say that what is likely is that there will be an investigation into that conduct by the State Bar. And remember, the client doesn't have to move for that. It can be brought by anyone in terms of the State Bars. But I will say that disbarment, that is a high bar to cross. We see sanctions and discipline and kind of slaps on the wrist for things before disbarment occurs. So that would be a slippery slope. But also with illegal campaign donations, we've seen in the past that can be either a federal investigation with a monetary fine or a criminal investigation. So again, there's so many moving parts here, but I believe it's important for the courts to step in and arbitration to step in to make these decisions.
So speaking of investigations, if you take the president at his word that he didn't know about the $130,000 payment, is he legally in the clear now when it comes to concerns about violating any sort of campaign finance law?
It would depend on whether he gave Michael Cohen kind of a blanket consent from the beginning to here, use this money for settlements, or here there's money. So knowledge about this specific one, it kind of, if you take a step back, would relate to whether he had knowledge in general of these settlements as possibilities. We've heard other women come forward with allegations, and now there are questions raised. Are there others? So those are the questions that would be important to find out that answer to before we would know whether he in fact would be liable in the campaign front. But certainly he would be not without scrutiny, and he wouldn't make it outside of the limelight either in this.
It's all so complicated. Emily Compagno, thank you for breaking it down for us.